Hello everybody, my name is Marco Bucci. I was the artist who did a lot of the work for Karmaka, and I want to welcome you today to my studio. I want to show you guys a bit of more in-depth into the work that I was lucky enough to do for the game Karmaka. Before I jump into digital realm though, let's take a quick tour of the studio. So let's take a look around in here. This is kind of the main attraction. This is where I paint digitally. This is where all the paintings for Karmaka was done. This is my Wacom Cintiq. It's the newest model. It's you paint on the screen with this thing. It's really cool. And equally as important is to note that it's held up by Disney VHS tapes. That is the secret sauce. I got some really cool stuff in here. As we pass along here, we say hello to Nova. And through my window, I've got a great view of my totally messy backyard, which I need to sweep up. This is my traditional painting setup. You can see a finished painting here, framed, ready to go out the door. I've got some really cool pencil crayons, all the pencil crayons you could possibly ever want. It's like a kindergarten classroom exploded in here. I've got an airbrush and a coffee cup and a wine glass and another coffee cup because I drink a lot of wine and coffee. This is a cool bookshelf where I've got tons of inspiration, art books and fiction novels and tons of stuff. I love to read as well. Moving around here, I also like to sculpt with clay. This is a little guy I'm just finishing up. Here's a better look at this guy. His name is Morris. Beneath that, I've got a lot of clay tools. And yeah, I could spend my whole life in here, as you could probably tell. But here we go, the screen is magically turned on and we have some Karmaka stuff. So let's dive in and I'll show you sort of a behind the scenes look. All right, so here we are magically in Photoshop. I think the greatest thing about digital painting is that it's kind of a playground where you can combine all of the things you learn from traditional painting into a really neat user interface that unlocks so many cool things that you can do, spanning all of the tools you have traditionally, compacting them into one digital workspace. So this is the Karmaka box art, and of course this is the original PSD, so I can zoom in to 1:1. This is 100% zoomed in. This painting is about 8,000 pixels wide, which is fairly high res. You can get a really solid print out of this. If any of you guys came to visit us at PAX, you saw our big banner print of this art. As you can see, it's quite brushy, which you may not have noticed from the lower resolution cards that you've seen online. My painting style, just my training, has always been it's called alla prima in art lingo, which generally means done in one sitting. And when you paint in one sitting, things are very brushy. So I've got a brush here, and you can see I can just grab a color like this, and I can start brushing it. I'm just going to make a mess here, just to show you. I can brush it onto the canvas just like I could with oil paint or acrylic paint or gouache or, you name it, whatever paint medium you like the best. You can paint just like that. And there are tools within the digital realm that are made to mimic those kind of qualities. And then, of course, this being digital, there are also tools that you can't do traditionally. For example, these layers. If I zoom out, show you the whole thing. See my layer here called God Rays? If I turn that on and off, you can see what that is. They're just kind of rays coming from the sky that I have total control over. Because it's on a layer, I can go in and edit that layer. So I can go into this adjustment and make them brighter. Right? I can make them less bright. I could say okay to that, and I can move them around the canvas. I can rotate them or scale them. All these little minute controls I have digital. That is really the reason why artists in production today work digitally, because there's so many rounds of revisions. So many things, like up here at the top of this piece, my original painting had too many clouds in, and I had to revise it to change the clouds. And I had those clouds on a layer, so I could just turn them on and off. Of course, I've also got the title on a layer, turn that on and off. It just really opens up possibilities for quick production. So let's look at some cards. Here's the recycle card, which has kind of become the icon of the game. I've got the layers here, and when I paint it, I don't have the user interface, so I have that on a layer. And as you can see, I kind of cheat. If you notice what's beneath the user interface at the bottom, kind of gets a little sloppy because you don't see that part of the card, so I actually don't paint it quite as diligently. I've got things on a layer, so I start with this kind of thing, just a basic color, which in this case is the very background color. Then I overlay some work, and to do this, I've got a whole bunch of cool brushes. With digital, like I said, you can do a whole bunch of cool things, like if I pulled out this triangle brush here, I could use it to paint. I'll just do it like this. You can see these triangles. It's almost like I have like a spatter brush that always makes triangles, and that's pretty cool. I use it a lot on the trees and things like that. I also have brushes that have a lot of texture applied to them, like this brush. If I just paint with a very weird color, you can see it. You can see this interesting texture that's created by this brush. And the recycle card is largely a combination of those two brushes. You can see as I put brush strokes around the canvas, I can even zoom in a little bit. As I put more brush strokes around the canvas, you can get a sense of how I like to work, just on a single layer or on as few layers as possible, and just paint as if this were an actual oil or acrylic painting on a real canvas. Of course, I could actually do this painting on a real canvas as well if I chose to. It's just that, like I said, digital just gives you so much ease in terms of reworking things and kind of jigging things around. I mean, if I wanted to, if I didn't like, say, the color of this, I could do a quick color change and, make it more in this color family, or all the way, I can go crazy with this stuff. This is the power of digital painting. Of course, the tools have to be driven by the artist, right? You can't just get the software and just automatically know how to do this. I spent years studying traditionally. This is the foreground layer, the dung beetle that we all know and love. So you can see, if I can zoom into this at 100%, you can see the kind of, I call it detail. It's not really detail. It's just more attention to detail. I'm not trying to paint every particle of this dung beetle or of this dung ball, but I am trying to give a sense of the fact that it's made up of various materials. Who knows what this little dung beetle dude is rolling over in his quest to build this dung ball. And the same tools apply. I'll just go in here and paint up this ball. Here are a bunch of cards, and I kind of want to touch on a few things from an art direction standpoint. The first is the clarity of the thing I was illustrating was an important and really tough thing to come upon in this project. Something like the word spite. What does that word mean visually? So we did a lot of brainstorming on that, and you can kind of see I wrote a blog post, which you can find from the Kickstarter campaign. So I don't want to retread on that. You can read that in a blog. But if you look at any of these, Swindle, Mimic, Salvage, you can kind of see they all share a common clarity of an idea. Like Salvage is a boat wreck. And kind of evoking the principle of maybe you can salvage something from it. Spite, we thought of this snake making that hissy S sound, which is also part of the word spite. The image seemed to match the word. Crisis, a boat sort of exploding or some kind of crisis at sea happening. Everything is kind of boiled down to one singular idea. So that was an overall theme that was kind of hard to come by from an illustration standpoint. Because a lot of the times in illustration, we try and make our work too complex and try and sell too many things. In Karmaka, because these cards will be printed about the size you're seeing them on your screen right now, it was important to really get them down to their base idea. Then within that, so if you look at Mimic, let's zoom in on Mimic, one of my favorite cards. You can kind of get a sense of my goal as a painter was to take that singular idea and have as much fun with it texturally as possible. So if you look at this, you can see all different kinds of brush strokes. You can see circular brush strokes, more oil brush strokes, kind of smudgy brush strokes, all on top of this kind of stained glass, more hard-edged look. That was kind of a textural thing that as a painter I really had fun doing. And you can kind of see that all over the place. If I look at Crisis, this was another one where it combines a lot of textural elements. This was a very complex painting, so I had to really keep it clear with a big shape for the boat, this big pointy shape to sell that it's a boat and water, but within that you can kind of see all of these interesting brush strokes. I mean, hopefully they're interesting, abstractly. And my goal as a painter is always to be as clear with expressing myself as possible. So let's say you were to take a crop of the painting that looked like this. My goal is to still make this little subset of the painting interesting. So devoid of all its context, I still want that to be interesting. That's my goal as an artist. So these cards were really fun to dive into, no pun intended, and paint up all of this interest within an overall simple idea. And they're all like that. Actually, let's get back to this card for a second, because this was interesting. I can show you an early version here, just to illustrate a concept that I don't think I talked about in the blog. This that you're looking at here was the version 1 of Crisis. It was actually called Dilemma back then. And you might think it's the same, and I can put them side by side. And there are a few obvious differences. The palette, for example, on the right, the finished version, the palette is more complex and more interesting and dynamic while still being within the family of red. But that's not what I want to draw your attention to. Look on the one on the left and look at the bottom left of the illustration. See, I've hidden another ship in there. And I've also hidden this other life raft. This is kind of cool. It was certainly fun to paint that, but it creates a problem with focus. Like I said already, we want you to focus on one singular thing, and me kind of trying to be a clever artist and hide something in the painting was actually a distraction. And it created this dual sort of competitive focal point. So you can see in the final, where that boat was, it's just now more waves. And that life raft has been moved up closer to the main vessel. So compositionally, your eye is kind of doing a circle around this focal point area. So this is the kind of things that an artist and illustrator thinks about when he or she is painting that is kind of, easily taken for granted when you're just flipping through the cards. Some of the most fun I had from a painting standpoint was on this card, Vengeance. As you can see, I can scroll through this, and you can see just the abstractness of this painting. I always find it fascinating when a painter can be abstract but still sell a picture that is not abstract. So in this case, I'm trying to show you a picture of a caveman trying to exact some vengeance on a lowly cave dweller. That's kind of the story and the literal translation. But on another layer, when I'm painting it, I'm trying to express abstractly that idea of, in this case, vengeance with these really slashy brushstrokes. So painting for me kind of works on two different levels. The literal story that you're trying to get across, which is what most people will see, but then also that subtle layer of expression. And that's just been a goal of mine in my painting career, is to pursue this kind of painting, because I love it so much when other artists pull it off, and I'm constantly in awe of other artists who do it well. You can also use that to your advantage for readability. In this card, Swindle, the main focal point was the fox and the crow, kind of connected with this tree. So I had to kind of be a little more literal with how I painted them. Still not photorealistic by any means, but I had to kind of put a little more sharpness in there and make sure that shapes were carved out nicely. But then in the background, I kind of contrast that with really abstract brush strokes. You can see these trees using a lot of that same triangle brush from Recycle that I showed you earlier. And that also helps marry all the cards together. Using the same kind of brush sets, in this case, these digital brush sets on this project, helped me to maintain a universe for these paintings. So they all subconsciously register as being part of the same set. So, you can look at any Karmaka painting and say, okay, that's part of the game Karmaka. That's not part of Magic, for example. That's a goal that any artist has when they're contributing to a body of work. So this was a lot of fun to do. You can see, if you hide the interface, how sloppy I am underneath the interface. In fact, this particular card, the Swindle card, is for sale as an art print. And one of the jobs I had to do was I had to hide the interface and paint underneath this and kind of patch up the otherwise sloppy work that I'd left behind. You'd be amazed at what you can get away with when you paint. And I don't mean get away with in this cheating sense. I mean knowing what it is that someone's mind responds to, someone's eye responds to when they see a painting that sells what it is. You can see how abstract this character is and how abstract, even more abstract this character is, I'm only showing you the shapes that will help you register what's going on. Like, for example, if you look at this character's ear, I'm showing you the top of the ear, and because you're expecting to see that, you kind of fill in the rest. There's really nothing else here. It's just general shapes and lights and darks that, through kind of years of study and observation, I've kind of boiled down my own personal visual language of how the world can be interpreted by your brain. And when I paint, I'm kind of just recalling that. So in this kind of character here, if you look at his face, I only really have to show you a few basic shapes and no detail, and your brain fills in the rest. And then when you kind of zoom out and look at it as a whole, it has the illusion of detail, but that's only because I've been hopefully accurate with my large shapes of light and dark and, you know, some color. If you look at the hands here, here's another good example. This looks like two hands clapping, but if you zoom in, it's anything but that, really. It's just some shapes that remind you of it. And to me, that's the magic of painting, is to kind of tap into that illusion, kind of spurring your mind to create the image of hands clapping, while me as the artist, I only have to give you just that basic information for you to take it forth and fill in the rest of it. On this card here, the embody card, I had to do a lot more work because this one was the most intricate card of the whole set. You can see these concentric circles. That was a tough thing to do. I kind of mapped it out with a circle tool. Photoshop has this ellipse tool where you can draw these ellipses. So I kind of made a kind of mechanical guideline of what the circles would look like mathematically, which is why they look accurate. In traditional, I would have used a stencil for that. And then within that, I had some fun with, you know, getting a brush, getting this blue color, for example, and simply painting in over top of my template, I guess you can say. And I would just paint in these colors. Then, you know, I would use these digital tools here, like I'd grab this lasso brush and I would maybe carve out one square at a time, and if I wanted it to be green, I could grab a green color and just kind of fill it in here like a stencil, and that's how I would add all of these little blocks. So you can see there's, you know, maybe 100 blocks in this whole painting, and then over top of that I would add spatter textures and, you know, little intricate little color minglings, but kind of one block at a time was how this painting was done. And then over top of all that, the figure was done very brushy. You can see these brushy kind of strokes where I used this oil painting technique where you have a brush and you just kind of brush it in and let the pigment mix together. In this case, digital pigment. And that's how this character was painted in the embody painting. I think that's about it, guys. I just want to thank you for checking out the video, and hopefully this was informative. I always find behind the scenes stuff informative because, you know, it reveals layers that you might not know was there. In this case, literal layers. How do you like that? Okay, I gotta go. Thanks for watching, and thank you if you have backed the game, Karmaka. I really appreciate it. I'm really thrilled with how much groundswell this thing is getting, and that's largely thanks to you and all the Kickstarter backers. So maybe I will see you at a future convention, but until then, please enjoy the game.